What if the real danger is not that Iran is losing? What if the real danger is that Iran has learned how to survive? On June 3, 2026, Donald Trump said something very confident about Iran. He said Iran had no navy, no air force, very few soldiers, no leadership, a collapsing economy. And if you only listen to that statement, the message is obvious. Iran is finished. America is winning. The pressure is working. But here is the strange part. On that same day, Iran launched around 30 ballistic missiles and drones toward Kuwait. Kuwait International Airport shut down commercial flights. Iran suspended negotiations with the United States. And Iranian officials publicly warned that any further American aggression would be answered with more missiles and drones. So let me ask the question again. If Iran is really broken, why has America not won? That is the question most media coverage is avoiding, because the real story may not be whether Iran is stronger than America. It obviously is not. The real story is whether Iran can make victory too expensive. And that brings us to what I call the North Korea model. The North Korea model is simple. You do not have to defeat the United States. You do not have to match American aircraft carriers, American fighter jets, American satellites, or American money. You only have to do one thing: make attacking you not worth it. That is exactly what North Korea did. North Korea is poor. It is isolated. It has a weak economy. It cannot compete with the United States in a conventional war. And yet, America does not attack North Korea. Why? Because North Korea built a system of deterrence where the cost of war is unacceptable. Nuclear weapons, artillery pointed at Seoul, Chinese involvement, regional chaos. The result is simple. Even a superpower looks at North Korea and says, not worth it. And now, Iran appears to be building its own version of that model. Not the same model, a bigger one, a model built around nuclear risk, broken diplomacy, China and Russia, cheap weapons, and the Strait of Hormuz. Let's go through it. Condition number 1, nuclear deterrence. Before this war, Iran was not exactly North Korea. Iran had nuclear capability, but not a confirmed tested nuclear weapon. That matters. There is a difference between being near the threshold and crossing it. A country that can build a bomb is dangerous. A country that has already tested one is in a completely different category. That is why the United States and Israel wanted to strike Iran before it crossed the line. But here is the paradox. By attacking Iran before it had a nuclear weapon, Washington and Israel may have given Tehran the strongest argument for why it now needs one. Look at the pattern from Iran's perspective. Iraq had no nuclear deterrent. It was invaded. Libya gave up its nuclear program. Gaddafi was overthrown and killed. Iran was still involved in negotiations, and it was attacked anyway. So, what lesson? Does a rational government learn from this? The lesson is brutal, but simple. If you want to survive American pressure, you need the ultimate insurance policy, a nuclear weapon. That does not mean Iran already has one, but it does mean the incentive has changed. The campaign meant to stop Iran from becoming nuclear may have convinced Iran that going nuclear is the only way to survive. That is the first step toward the North Korea model. Condition number 2, killing the old diplomatic track. North Korea eventually stopped treating negotiations with Washington as a serious path to security. It stopped waiting for American guarantees. It stopped believing American promises, and it built its strategy around permanent confrontation. Iran now appears to be moving in a similar direction. On June 3rd, Iran suspended negotiations with the United States, but the condition it gave was important. Iran said there would be no further dialogue unless Israel permanently stopped military operations in Gaza and Lebanon. That sounds like a diplomatic demand, but look closer. That is not a condition Washington can easily satisfy without breaking with Israel, and Iran knows that. So this may not be a real attempt to restart talks. It may be Iran saying, the old game is over. We no longer trust the deal-making process. We no longer believe American guarantees, and we are preparing to survive without you. That is important, because diplomacy is leverage. If Washington can offer a deal, Washington has leverage. If Washington can threaten to withdraw from a deal, Washington has leverage. But if Iran no longer believes the deal matters, then that leverage begins to disappear. Condition number 3, economic survival outside the US system. This is where Iran is more dangerous than North Korea. North Korea survived because China kept it alive. Iran is trying to survive by becoming part of a much larger anti-dollar system. Iran sells oil to China. Some of that trade can move outside the US dollar. Iran is also connected to BRICS Plus, alternative payment systems, and the broader global movement to reduce dependence on Western financial infrastructure. This is not just about Iran. Russia is watching. China is watching. India is watching. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and many other countries are watching. They have all seen what happens when the United States weaponizes the dollar. Assets can be frozen. Banks can be cut off. Payment systems can be blocked. Sanctions can be expanded overnight. And every time Washington uses the dollar as a weapon, more countries start asking the same question. What happens if we are next? That is why Iran is not just trying to survive sanctions. Iran is trying to survive inside a new economic world where sanctions hurt less than they used to. The dollar is not collapsing tomorrow. That would be a fantasy. But the direction matters. Every oil deal outside the dollar, every alternative payment system, every country looking for a backup to SWIFT. Every one of these is a small crack in the foundation of American financial power. Iran is trying to live inside those cracks. Condition number 4, asymmetric deterrence. This is the most important one. Iran cannot defeat the United States in a normal war. It cannot match American aircraft carriers. It cannot match American air power. It cannot match American technology. But Iran does not need to win that kind of war. It only needs to make that war painful enough that America cannot justify it. North Korea has Seoul. Iran has the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow passage is one of the most important choke points on Earth. A massive share of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas moves through it. If Hormuz becomes unsafe, the impact is immediate. Oil prices rise, shipping costs rise, insurance costs rise, inflation rises, Asian economies panic. Western voters feel it at the gas pump. That is Iran's version of deterrence. Not because Iran can defeat the US Navy, but because Iran can make the region unstable enough that victory becomes expensive. And this is where cheap weapons become powerful. A low-cost drone can force the United States to fire a missile that costs hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. That is not just a military exchange. That is an economic trap. Iran does not need to shoot down every plane. It does not need to sink every ship. It only needs to make every move cost more than Washington wants to pay. That is how weaker states survive. They do not fight the empire where the empire is strongest. They fight where the empire is most expensive to maintain. Now, to be fair, there is a strong argument against all of this. Iran is under huge pressure. Its economy is struggling. Its nuclear facilities have been attacked. Its people are suffering. The United States still has overwhelming military power. So maybe Trump is right. Maybe Iran is weaker than it looks. Maybe enough pressure will eventually force Tehran back to the table. That argument is not stupid, but it has one major problem. External pressure does not always collapse a government. Sometimes it strengthens it. When a country is attacked from outside, even people who dislike the government may rally around the state. The conflict stops being about politics. It becomes about national survival. And Iran does not need to defeat America. It needs to endure. That is the key word, endure. Every day Iran remains standing is a message. Every missile launch is a message. Every oil shipment outside the dollar system is a message. Every Gulf country that begins doubting American protection is a message. Every expensive interceptor fired at a cheap drone is a message. And the message is this: you can hurt us, But can you afford to finish the job? That is the North Korea model. Not victory, survival, not dominance, deterrence, not defeating the superpower, making the superpower hesitate. So what should we watch next? First, watch Iran's nuclear language. If Iran moves from enrichment toward actual weaponization, that is the point where the entire game changes. Second, watch the Gulf states. If Saudi, Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, or Bahrain start making quiet security arrangements with Iran, that means they no longer fully trust the American umbrella. Third, watch China. If Beijing proposes a Gulf security framework that includes Iran and excludes the United States, that would be a major sign that the regional order is shifting, because this is bigger than one war. This is about whether American power can still force outcomes in the Middle East. And that brings us back to the opening question. If Iran has no navy, no air force, no leadership, and a collapsing economy, why has America not won? The answer may be uncomfortable, because modern power is not just about who has the bigger military. It is about cost. It is about endurance. It is about deterrence. North Korea proved that a weaker country can survive by making itself too dangerous to attack. Iran may now be trying to do the same thing. But unlike North Korea, Iran sits at the center of global energy, global shipping, and the emerging anti-dollar order. So the real question is not, can Iran defeat America? The real question is, can IRA make an American victory too expensive to pursue? And if the answer is yes, then we may not be watching Iran collapse. We may be watching Iran become the next North Korea, but in the heart of the Middle East.